you so much for joining. I'm John. Lovely to have you here. I think this is one of the sessions that a lot of development sector professionals in India have been waiting for, especially from the state rural livelihood missions, young professionals. We've got a lot of requests, especially for this session and the following ones. I'm very happy to introduce to you T. Vijay Kumar sir, who was the first mission director of National Rural Livelihood Mission, which is India's flagship program for rural poverty eradication through organizing and empowering women. Sir is also an advisor to Government of Andhra Pradesh on agriculture and cooperation. He also has worked extensively and speaks regularly on zero budget natural farming with an aim to make Andhra Pradesh India's first natural farming state. Today, T. Vijay Kumar sir is with us to talk about poverty alleviation through building community institutions. How do we do that? What is your advice, sir? How can we learn from your experiences? And what do you want to share with the audience? This stream is live here on Zoom. We have it live on YouTube channels. We have it live on Book My Show. We have it live on Quint's YouTube channels with 2.3 million subscribers. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to hear your thoughts, followed by a panel session.
Thank you, John. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. And I also welcome the panelists who are my friends for a very long time. And actually, this John, this session has, sort of made me very nostalgic because I was heading SERP in the year 2000. So it's about 20 years since this whole journey of since this journey began, my journey, I mean the journey of the poor has been going on for a very long time. The purpose of this session, as I understand, because the time is around 30 minutes, so it's very difficult to encapsulate 20 years of work into 30 minutes. So what I will do is I will try to draw lessons from this work. And first of all, I must acknowledge the support of so many colleagues, seniors, my mentors who have helped me in this journey, and most important, the women, the Didis in the self-help groups. They have been my teachers. I am extremely indebted to them, and I think they perhaps don't appreciate that in this exchange, I have gained much more than what they have gained. So I think I'm most grateful to them. And, in those days, I'm talking about 20 years ago, when NGOs and others started this work of organizing women, the dominant motto used to be that women need development. But then I think as on date, thanks to NRLM, we can actually say that development is not possible without women. So development needs women, and that is the biggest paradigm shift, I would say, that NRLM has brought about. Broadly, there are 3 or 4 different phases of evolution depending on how one looks at it. So I will, try to divide this into the following phases. The first phase, I would say, was the phase of the 80s, the NGO phase, where a lot of grassroots activity against great odds started in the 80s. Then the second phase I like to put as the work done in Andhra Pradesh from 1995 to 2010, which is the UNDP South Asia Poverty Alleviation Pilot, and then the SERP, which started in the year 2000. But along the way, the great instances of work done in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and the DPIP work in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. So this is one phase, I would say 1995 to 2010. Then there is the NRLM phase, in which I'm very proud to have been the first mission director. So 2010 till date. And briefly, I'll touch upon what are the challenges and opportunities when we look beyond 2020, because all of us are aware that we are facing a crisis of huge magnitude, never before. So in this process, what are the lessons for us moving forward? What are the challenges and what are the opportunities? The NGO phase, as I call it, was some of the outstanding NGOs of that phase. Mairada, Al Fernandez, if he is listening to this, then Wasim Malai of Dhan, then Pradhan, AKRSP, etc. They struggled very hard because this concept was not understood, was ridiculed, and but one of the most remarkable achievements in this phase, apart from the lessons learned in organizing and building institutions of women, was the excellent set of norms developed for self-help groups. And I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Mairada, Al Fernandez in particular. And there was one more on the institutional side. The RBI recognized the self-help groups. So that's very, very fundamental, because India is the only country where a informal entity has been recognized as an institution by the country's central bank. And that is what separates us from the joint liability groups promoted by the MFIs. So this is one very fundamental breakthrough. Two fundamental breakthroughs was development of the group norms of SHGs, the meeting process, the accounting, the audit process. So it's very important. And all the state rural livelihoods missions know the concept of Panchasutra. So all these were fashioned out of the struggles of the initial NGO phase and the recognition of the institution. Then coming to the pilot, which was run in Andhra Pradesh in about 20 mandals from 95 onwards. The genesis is a independent South Asia Commission on Poverty Alleviation, which was set up by the SAARC, and this committee submitted its report in 1993 in time for the Dhaka summit. And I would strongly advise all of you to read the book called Meeting the Challenges. And this was a very critical reference point for us while I was in SERP and again in NRLM. And I think many of those principles are valid even today and across various geographies. So in this, what are those critical universal principles which governed NRLM and the precursors, and what we have been able to distill? I just list out for your consideration, and these are the principles which have guided my actions. So I hold them as very, very valid and something very, very important. First and foremost is that every poor person is extremely capable and has a very strong desire to come out of poverty. So poor are not objects of charity. They face so many obstacles in their day-to-day lives when they're trying to come out of poverty and lead a decent life. And these obstacles could be economic, social, cultural, religious, political, range of obstacles. And institutions of poor are critical for enabling each one to come out of these obstacles, to overcome the obstacles. So the lessons from successful poverty eradication programs worldwide have been that individually poor cannot come out of poverty even though they are capable. So therefore, institutions of poor are extremely important. And in India, when we talk about institutions of poor, there are many institutions of poor. But in this current talk, I'll be talking about the institutions of women, and more particularly rural women, because that's what my experience is. So, so the institutions of women are extremely critical to enable each household to come out of poverty. And when we say women SHGs, we mean the whole household. So it's not women member, of course, women member, but the whole family. And one of the other observations, which is again universally valid, all of you working in the field know this, that among the communities, among the poor, there are community heroes. These are the diamonds of the community. Even though they are poor, they are more than willing to spend time and effort in working for others. So their role in organizing the communities, their role in leadership positions is extremely critical in this process. So these community heroes are, I think, the most important investment that a mission can make is in identifying, nurturing, and according suitable roles to the community hero. So as I said, institutions of poor are extremely critical. Institutions of poor have the heroes guiding them, running them. At the same time, there is a need for catalytic institutions, and those are called institutions for the poor. So in the present case, the state rural livelihoods missions, NGOs, banks, so they are external to the poor. At the same time, they are engaged with them. So these institutions for the poor have a very important catalytic role, and they are the ones who are with the communities at all times, but without encroaching the autonomy of the institutions of the poor. And one of the important roles of the institutions for poor is the capacitation of the women's leaders, their community professionals. Now, what is very interesting is as the institutions of poor become strong, they evolve, the role of the institutions for the poor needs to change. So the institution of poor, they take over many of the roles which was formerly played by the institutions for the poor. And so one important lesson for all of us is, as external agencies, whether the NGOs or state rural livelihoods missions or banks, we have to ensure that our role keeps changing. The women's the self-help groups or their federations, they take more and more active role in managing the institutions. So the institution for poor is a mentor, but should not become a tormentor. So that is very important. One of my mentors told me that, I should keep this in mind. I should never forget this. And in this, say, the 15 years of SAPAP and SERP, 1995 to to 2010, there are several key innovations. Due to paucity of time, I have just picked up what I thought were very important ones, which I wanted to communicate to all of you. That the staff, the mission staff, the staff of the NGO, the staff of the SRLMs, staff of the local self-government. So what is critical is a dedicated staff, empathetic staff, and this starts right from the top. So this is one of the hallmarks of a good supporting institution. So without this, the whole process can just degenerate into a numbers game. The second thing is the force multiplier in the case of SERP was the building of federation of SHGs. So self-help groups federated at the village level, Gram Aikya Sanghas, or called village organizations in brief. Then all these federations, village federations in a mandal, came together as a mandal Samakhya. It's also called cluster federation in many states. And in Andhra Pradesh, the further federation went up to the Jilla Samakhya level, the district federation. And I still remember during this process, there's a lot of criticism, and some of the NGOs actually opposed it. So this has, but I believe very strongly that the strength of institutions of the poor multiplies when there is a federation. Then one of the things that has happened in our case, which is also very important, is the ownership of the government. And that gives it the ability to take it to scale. It has also certain problems because certain problems come from the ownership of the government. But overall, on the balance, I believe that the government ownership of at the state level, central level of this process is extremely important for us to reach out to every poor person. The other innovation in Andhra Pradesh, which I'm happy to note that has been taken across the states, was induction of young professionals. We actually recruited close to 4,000 young professionals in the first 3 years of the project. And so these people were, very dedicated. We trained them extensively, built participatory skills in these young people. And while we had the young professionals, we developed a very interesting strategy, which is actually at the heart of the scaling up of NRL. And that is what is called as a community resource person strategy. So those women whose lives have been transformed by being members of the self-help group, by being best practitioners in the self-help groups, were asked whether they are willing to go as trainers to other districts, to other states. And this, I'm sure the State Rural Livelihoods missions will endorse my saying this, that the CRP strategy was one of the most critical breakthroughs. That means the scaling up, the intervention, the implementation of the program was done by the poor themselves. So then it truly became a program, not only of the poor, program for the poor, but a program by the poor. And this is a very, very important breakthrough. And in fact, that is something which was one of the best innovations, I would say. And then the other innovation was the evolution of the role of banks, the evolution in the role of NABARD, because the bank's attitude towards self-help groups, initially I remember we had a lot of battles with the banks because they insisted only on lending multiples of savings of self-help groups. We had a very difficult time to change them to funding the business plans of SHGs based on the social equity, not financial equity. So that was another very important task, and that also brought in the the role of SHGs in ensuring equity, in always ensuring that the poorest within the group, the poorest group within the village organization, were given support first. So priority to the poorest is something which has to be seen as a non-negotiable in the value system that we are talking about. And one of the most important innovations or impacts, I would say, involvement of the self-help groups through their weekly meetings, fortnightly meetings, meetings of the village organizations, fortnightly, monthly, the Mandal Samakya meetings, brought in tremendous amount of transparency in the program. And this, I think, is the reason why the program is able to sustain for such a long period of time. The transparency, the mutual trust is very critical and can't be built without transparency. And one of the other things that used to happen those days was the banks were making a distinction between consumption loans and production loans. So we were able to influence the banks to say that whatever decision taken by the SHG and by their members, so whether it is for consumption or production, the distinction should not be there. The SHG is the best judge of assessing the members' requirements. So I would say that I'm very happy that the banks have evolved along the way, and one of the things that was also very, I would say, a catalyst in this was that the state government of Andhra Pradesh uh, went in for interest subvention rather than capital subsidy. So this interest subvention means awarding good behavior on part of the self-help group in taking the loan and repaying the loan. So the interest subvention had two impacts. One, the group norms improved, and the second was the banks were able to confidently lend more because the interest was subvented by the government. The other thing which actually spilled over into NRLM was that coming out of abject poverty requires multiple doses of financing and continuous handholding by the members, by the institutions. It takes about 5-7 years, 20 to 25 small loans, 4 to 5 big loans. So getting this understanding was very critical both for SERP and also for NRLM. The other innovation which was present in the NGOs but happened on a very large scale in SERP and is happening in all the SRLMs is the role of community professionals. The community heroes that I spoke about, some of them become leaders, but others are like community professionals. We have the bank Sakhi, the Krishi Sakhi, Pashu Sakhi, the women activists fighting on gender issues, were working on audit. So a whole new system, a wide range of community professionals came on board, and I think that's one of the biggest contributions. And then on the SERP platform, which started with women self-help groups and microfinance, but we could mount 10 to 12 other interventions. Some were on livelihoods, agriculture, sustainable agriculture, livestock, land rights, marketing, then on social development issues, health, nutrition, gender issues, education. Then the group started acting as pressure groups on government to ensure their services were provided to them. And what is interesting is that each of these interventions started as a pilot, taking the help of NGOs, resource organizations, and then it grew into much bigger. So what SERP and SRLMs have the strength to scale up interventions through the community institutions, through community professionals. I think that is very unique contribution, I would say, of the whole program. And I must say, as I said, for the 10 years I was heading SERP almost every fortnight. I used to have interactions with the Jilla Samakyas to learn about the program. In this journey from for about 20 years, I want to acknowledge the role of two institutions, role of World Bank for initially supporting SERP and then NRLM, and particularly the task leader Parmesh Shah. I think everybody knows him. And then the UNDP, one for the role it played in CEPAP, and also subsequently the supporting role it played in NRL. And there were controversies in between. We had the huge MFI SHG controversy, which brought out the exploitativeness of the MFIs, and RBI was forced to clamp down. The NRLM, I must, acknowledge Neeta. I'm sure she's here, and she must be completing about 10 years in NRLM. And when we wrote the mission document, I was going through the mission document. So we had envisaged that 7 crore women would be organized. This was way back in 2010. And I'm happy to know that in 2020, this year, the ministry's document shows that 7 crore women have been organized. We've gone to all the states. But some of the innovations in NRLM, time is running out. One is the framework evolved through consultations. And my secretary told me, Mr. B.K. Sinha, said Vijay Kumar will not issue any guidelines to the states. It will evolve every year based on our experience, because some things may fail, some things may do well. So it's a living document, and that is something which we are very particular that we should not insist uniformity. And one of the most unique characteristics of NRLM, I would say, is the recognition that the country should reach out to every poor family in the country. So universal social mobilization, the recognition of institutions of poor, recognition it takes 7 to 10 years, and vast amount of budgets were kept for building the capacities of institutions of poor, and also building capacities of the SRLFs. There are certain things which, I just want to say that we used to hold right shops where all the state missions, their NGO supporters used to come, and we used to, work out what should be the action plans. And we are also thought that great importance should be given to building the capacities of the state missions. So I must compliment my colleagues, particularly the mission director of various state rural livelihoods missions. And we also have the concept of NROs, where states would support other states. I know that I'm running out of time, but just the last 2-3 minutes on what are the challenges, both internal and then external. First, internal, one, I am worried whether, are we too much top down? SSGs are not delivery points, and convergence with government schemes is both good and bad. One has to be careful in ensuring the role of SSGs in this. And are we losing focus on the quality of groups, the norms which are critical for running of the groups? Finally, the challenge, we have multiple emergencies. COVID is only one of the symptoms, I believe, of a much bigger emergency, and that is the climate emergency. So this climate emergency also means farming, which is the main bedrock of the rural communities, is under great stress. So which is also eroding the financial capital of the SSGs. So the food that we're eating is not nutritious. We are running out of topsoil. We are also running out of water. So in the last 5 years, I've been working on a very different paradigm, and the women SHGs have been my partners in this process. So whatever success I have achieved in the last 5 years, right now we are the world's largest program on natural farming. Whatever success I have achieved is on account of the women self-help groups' role in this. So I see this as a huge opportunity for all the NGOs and the SRLMs, that the women self-help groups should take as their mandate that we should, change our way of producing our crops. Currently, it's a very destructive way of raising crops. So, if we move away, move into regenerative agriculture, move into natural farming, we will have not only women farmers and their husbands and families more profitable, more viable. At the same time, this program is also touted, is seen by global experts as a way of addressing climate change. So I'll just conclude that there is a role for the women self-help groups to actually save humanity. And I'm not joking, I'm very serious. There are a lot of international organizations which are with me when I'm making this statement that the 7 crore women self-help group members can be the center point of our country's effort to save not only our livelihoods, but also promote reversal of climate change. And I'm extremely serious. I'll be happy to take questions on this. John, I'll conclude here. It's a little unfair to condense 20 years into 30 minutes, but I respect the time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It is not very often that we get to hear from you about how the idea was conceived and how it became an institution of global repute.